It was definitely like a nightmare experience because I was basically told, that antipsychotics would be the key to keeping me sane, even though I realized that there were all these side effects that I thought I'd have to deal with indefinitely. It's now been more than 4 years and I have not had another episode of hypomania, mania, or depression. It's been absolutely transformative. Not only the absence of symptoms, but getting back parts of myself that honestly I hadn't even realized I'd lost until they started returning.
Hannah Warren is the Communications and Advocacy Manager for Baszucki Group and Metabolic Mind, where she raises public and professional awareness of metabolic psychiatry, the emerging field that explores metabolic therapies as treatments for mental illness. After being diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder and experiencing significant side effects from long-term psychiatric medication, Hannah discovered ketogenic and metabolic therapies in 2021. Through this approach, she achieved full remission and regained her health. And this experience has transformed her into a passionate advocate for metabolic treatments in mental health care. Hannah and I actually went to middle and high school together. So this is just wild to me. I had no idea that we were both working kind of like in the health and nutrition space. And it wasn't until I saw her speak at the Symposium for Metabolic Health where she told her story. And I realized, I was like, wait a minute. That's Hannah Warren. I know her. So we ended up reconnecting in February at the Collaborative Science Conference. And I wanted to bring her on the podcast because she has a very powerful story and a unique vegetarian therapeutic ketogenic diet that really isn't discussed very often. And I think it really should be, because this can be an option for people that really have this ethical concern about eating animals, but they really do need to consume a therapeutic ketogenic diet for their mental health. So what do? So that's why we're going to talk today. Hannah, I'm so excited to have you on Meat Matters. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's wonderful that you want to raise awareness that, ketogenic therapy can be done as a vegetarian. I want to be clear that there is no moral judgment that I have on anyone else and the fact that they want to eat meat. I've been a vegetarian ever since I was old enough to realize that meat was an animal, and it just made me lose my appetite, basically, to think of eating a dead animal. And my parents thought I would grow out of it, but I never did. And realizing that I could benefit from ketogenic therapy, I realized that I could adapt this diet to meet my needs. And at Metabolic Mind, we kind of always like to message that keto isn't one specific diet, right? Yes. It's about therapeutic carb reduction, and it can be done anywhere in the spectrum from plant-based to carnivore. There's a lot of ways to adapt this way of eating if you want to use it as a therapy.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people like you out there that really they can't stand the idea of eating an animal, and that's okay. That's okay. I eat a carnivore diet, you eat a vegetarian diet. That doesn't mean that we have to fight. We don't need to be so dogmatic about it. And in fact, sharing this vegetarian therapeutic ketogenic diet that you do, I think can be really helpful for a lot of people out there that are suffering from a lot of mental health issues and think like, oh, I can't, there's no way I could do a therapeutic ketogenic diet because I would have to eat animals and I just can't. Well, that's not true. You can do it too. I'm so excited to announce that my new book, Complete Carnivore, is now available for pre-order. Its official release date is November 4th, 2025, just in time for Black Friday and Christmas gifts. You can find the pre-order links in the show notes. This isn't just a cookbook. It's a complete end-to-end guide to the carnivore diet. Inside, you'll find 80 delicious carnivore recipes, a troubleshooting chapter for common challenges, and an entire chapter on blood work and monitoring your progress. Plus, there's a complete in-depth guide to make getting started easy and sustainable. If you're curious about the carnivore lifestyle or you'd like to give the gift of health to somebody this holiday season, Complete Carnivore has everything you need. Pre-order links are in the show notes. So why don't we start by diving into your background? I'd love to hear a little bit about your education and then kind of going into your mental health struggles.
Yeah, it sounds great. I definitely also want to say it is a little bit ironic to me because I certainly never thought I would have so many carnivore friends. And then, entering this space, it's like, wow, I am friends with so many carnivores. But sometimes it works out well. Like I was at a restaurant with a friend and her husband does the carnivore diet and he gave me his vegetable sides at dinner. And I was like, this is great. So there's some real upsides.
We can work together.
We can. That's all the love. So as far as my background, yeah, when I had my first episode of, manic, psychotic, bipolar episode. It came a little bit later in life when I was 28. And up to that point, anything that, in retrospect, we might see as an indicator of bipolar disorder would have been something that was hypomanic, that up to that point seemed like an asset. So I had, I had finished my bachelor's degree at that time in South Asian Studies and Linguistics. I had spent a lot of time abroad in India and fell in love with the culture and learned to speak the language. And I had started a nonprofit organization there that was focused on women's empowerment, helping women to be employed in the garment manufacturing industry. We had like a nonprofit social enterprise garment manufacturing industry so that they could earn a good living wage and send their kids to school. And I'd gotten some support from Rotary International. And at the time, when I had my episode, I actually had a full scholarship to get my master's degree at University of the Arts London in fashion entrepreneurship to support the work that I was doing in India. And I was, going back and forth. And at the time, I didn't see any indicators that anything was going awry.
How old were you?
I was 28.
28, okay.
Yeah, and I was just, I loved life. I was passionate about the work that I was doing, about thinking about the need to create more global equity, and I felt like I was doing something meaningful in this community that mattered to me. And my kind of experience of psychosis came seemingly out of nowhere. I'll always remember, of course, because it's such a bizarre experience, and I can remember it in vivid detail. In many ways it was really hyper real, and something that will always stand out to me because it felt so epic and different than anything I'd experienced before. But I had been working on a paper one night, and like so many college students, it was often that was like right before the deadline when you have all that adrenaline and like you spend all night writing and kind of synthesize your ideas together beautifully and then crash at like 4 a.m. and get up and submit your paper on time. But like, I just didn't crash, and instead my thoughts began to get more and more incoherent and strange, and slowly started to lose touch with reality. I was awake for I don't know how many days on end in my apartment and started hallucinating. I remember seeing, I felt like my clothes were moving around by themselves.
Wow.
I saw a snake slithering through my apartment that I realized wasn't there.
Right.
And I wandered out eventually into the streets and into a church where they were teaching English as a second language, and I was obviously hallucinating. I asked them to please introduce me to God, and instead they called the police, who had to come and drag me out kicking and screaming. And then I ended up becoming an inpatient at a psych ward.
Wow, that's wild to go from to just living your life to complete break.
Yeah, it was at a point where it seemed like my future was bright, everything was going well.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't even really drink. I was a very disciplined student, worked really hard, had paid my way through my undergrad.
Yeah.
It really just seemed, and it was so crushing, of course, then to go through that, because I came out of that, taking these medications that dramatically changed my body in a short amount of time. I put on more than 70 pounds and had all this brain fog and fatigue, but also suicidal ideation. And I would look back at photos of myself from just a few months earlier and feel like she was a different person. And I was mourning the loss of myself and felt like I had brain damage. I'm I'm never going to be that person again. She didn't know how good she had it, but it was so hard to grasp because nobody can give you a really clear explanation of what this diagnosis means. They can't point to some exact physiological thing at the time. It's this chemical imbalance. It's also, the language is so fuzzy, and there was no real explanation to me about how I could be thriving one minute and then all of a sudden have a totally different life.
Yeah. Wow. So that happened at 28, go into psychiatric ward. What happened next? Yeah,
because when I was in the psych ward, which was more than a month and a half, I really wasn't in touch with reality the whole time. I was in an altered state. And, I mentioned to you I'm doing some writing for Metabolic Mind, so I'm going to go into why, in some of this writing, why I think it's so important we actually don't use the language of psychosis. I think that's a word that evokes violence. Most people hear it and they think of someone who's psychotic as someone who's violent. And now I think of it more as an altered state. And what we know from metabolic psychiatry is that this is something that likely has to do with mitochondria malfunctioning and needing to improve your mitochondrial health. So it's really a dysregulation of energy and this kind of altered state of consciousness. That's what I think of it as. It was an altered state of consciousness that went on for a prolonged period of time. And it wasn't really until I actually got back to the US. I did take a break from my studies. Luckily, I was able to eventually finish my master's degree,
good.
which, having gotten a scholarship, I was so grateful that I was able to finish, because it was so painful to feel like, maybe I won't be able to do this after getting all the support. And it was definitely a challenging time. But it wasn't until I was back home and it really started to click, like that I had lost touch with reality, and just trying to make sense of it was so difficult. I felt like it made me question everything I thought I knew about my sense of self and reality, because you just don't imagine that all of a sudden you could feel like you lose touch with your will. And
I mean, that has to be incredibly scary. I mean, just thinking about that, if something like that happened to me, your entire worldview is completely shifted.
Yeah. It was definitely like a nightmare experience, because I was basically told, that antipsychotics would be the key to keeping me sane, even though I realized that there were all these side effects that I thought I'd have to deal with indefinitely. Really difficult trade-offs, because they blunted, like I hear from so many others, this is not just me, but so many individuals who I talk to who were put on antipsychotic medication, it really blunts your emotions and creates cognitive impairment, a lot of exhaustion and side effects that are really difficult to deal with. And like I said, the weight gain is very common, cardiometabolic side effects. So I basically just thought, this is my new quality of life. I'm gonna have to deal with this. And I lived in this kind of state for about 7 years of just, it felt like really a half life. Like I was kind of a shadow of myself. At a certain point, it was like, I've had 3 total episodes, so I tried to go off my medication twice. And both times ended up in a relapse. And the third time is when I amazingly discovered ketogenic therapy, which transformed everything. But after my second episode, it was when I thought I really had to accept, look, like you have this lifelong chronic illness, and if you don't take these medications, you're not going to be able to stay stable and sane, and really don't have a choice. So I thought it was just a difficult price that I was going to have to pay, and there really weren't any alternatives. I mean,
I think a lot of people that take psychiatric meds and experience those horrible side effects, they're very common. I mean, that they've accepted that as their new normal. That's just life, but that's like you said, it's like half life. It's like a shadow of your former life. How did you discover ketogenic therapies?
So it was before my third and hopefully final hospitalization that I actually did start doing a lot of things that I now realize in retrospect were metabolic therapies. So I got really into intermittent and extended fasting. And I felt such a heightened sense of energy and clarity when I was fasting. Like I could tell that it was having a really powerful effect on me. And I understood like the idea of autophagy, but I didn't have any idea that there was something uniquely therapeutic for like my bipolar disorder in that practice. But I got kind of addicted to it. And I had friends who started to show some concern. They're like, you're doing another like 5-day fast. What is going on? People couldn't understand like why I was so addicted to this. And even I didn't know, but intuitively it felt so good and restorative for me. I was also exercising during that time and meditating, and I had started to implement these things honestly before that. I had gotten into a lot of negative coping habits with my diagnosis, but because before I got sick, I aimed to be healthy. I ate what I thought was a healthy diet. I had a lot of positive practices, but when I felt like I did all of that, but I have this mysterious illness that I can't control, this medication that like no matter what I do, it throws me back and like don't have that same, quality of life. So I just thought, screw it, so I was drinking a lot and smoking. And but eventually I did decide, look, like this is not sustainable for me. I had a messy breakup, like someone who cheated on me, and it just set me to this place where I'm like, I cannot keep living like this. Like, I've got to try to envision a brighter future and have some hope. So I started journaling and like making small steps. And the first thing was cutting out those negative coping habits. And then starting to implement the positive ones, you know, the meditation, the exercise, the fasting. And slowly, like, my quality of life did really start to transform. And I started to feel like more like myself again. There were periods, you know, following the mania, like I went through some intense suicidal depression that lasted about a year, but then I'd stabilized, and it was more just like being in this numb, sedated state where I had lost the parts of my life that I used to enjoy the most, like being a deep thinker, or inquisitive, or creative. Like, all of that was gone. I just felt like, okay, I can support myself and live independently and work, but I'm just going to come home from work and I'm going to, first of all, work a job that is not challenging or interesting. Like, I'm just going to get through it, and then I'm going to go home and go to bed and like basically have no life, you know? So I spent years like that. But when I started to have hope and implement these things that I didn't realize were metabolic therapies at the time, and now, like, my quality of life did start to change. I started to become more creative again, started to have more energy and just enjoy life. And eventually I had this thought, you know, it's been about 7 years and I've been stable on these antipsychotics. Like, maybe I don't even have bipolar disorder anymore. Like, maybe I should try going off of these meds. So I did, but within 8 months I started to get hypomanic. And within a year, full-blown mania once again. I will say, though, something interesting about that third and final time. Like I said, I was doing these metabolic therapies without knowing what they were. Often, if you talk to clinicians, they say that people who experience psychosis, if they have multiple episodes, they tend to get consecutively worse each time. My third episode was by far the least severe of the three that I had. It didn't last as long. I wasn't hospitalized as long. I started to get back in touch with reality more quickly, which to me indicates that there was already some kind of healing of the root cause that was happening that I now believe is fully possible through these metabolic therapies. But it was getting out of the hospital then when, of course, I was given the same message, right? Like, you're going to have to stay on these medications if you don't want to get sick. Forever. If you don't want to end up as an inpatient, like, just totally loony off your ass, like, you're going to have to adhere to these medications. But I had only started to feel that sense of like some awe and joy and passion and like being a part of the, feeling like I was becoming the same person I used to be before I was sick. It was like I was waking up, and I wasn't ready to sacrifice this. I was just beginning to reclaim it, right? And it was a hard thought, but I thought, wouldn't it even be better to have like an episodic illness, but at least have some moments where you feel like you're alive than to live in this like sedated, numb, half state all the time, right?
That would be terrible,
And then to think of, we know throughout history there's been artists, obviously Van Gogh is the cliche that people talk about of someone with bipolar who just had saw so much beauty in life, but you think, would it have been better if he never painted and was just like sedated all the time? It's a terrible thing that you don't want to have to make that trade-off.
And
of course there was tragedy.
Choice.
And luckily you don't, right? That's the good news. Okay?
You don't have to make that choice.
I didn't know that. But luckily I did have that thought. Like in that moment, I'm like, what if there's some alternatives that I'm just not aware of? Like maybe there are other ways to be stable. And I started doing research, and I found some things like people talking about complicated supplement protocols, this, that, and the other thing. But eventually I landed on the website of Dr. Christopher Palmer. And I saw this idea of ketogenic therapy. And of course, immediately I was like, well, I'm in ketosis when I fast. I know that I always feel amazing. So like maybe there's something here, like immediate connection. And then, of course, later came to understand more about, I mentioned autophagy, like the cellular repair process. And with ketogenic therapy, you have this ongoing improvement in your mitochondrial health through, mitophagy, the cleaning out of those damaged mitochondria, mitochondrial biogenesis, making new healthy mitochondria. And the reason, I really believe in the brain energy theory and think that the ketogenic therapy did have that ongoing mechanism of cellular repair is that even though I felt a lot better immediately when I switched from glucose to ketones and would get into ketosis, I felt this incremental, gradual kind of transformation too, where like a year into my ketogenic therapy, I just felt like, wow, I've been rebuilt as a person. Like I felt so renewed. So I really believe there's something to that as well, that kind of ongoing mitochondrial changes. And that, of course, can happen with plant-based keto or carnivore keto, whatever you're doing, it's going to be that upregulation of...
That's interesting. So you found Chris Palmer's work, you started implementing that and tying your fasting experiences, your meditation, your journaling, your exercise, tying everything all together. Were you still taking medications at this time?
So, I had been put back on the medication when I was hospitalized for the acute crisis, right? But when I got out of the hospital, I only stayed on for a couple weeks because I'm like, I know exactly what's going to happen if I continue to adhere to this medication, which is I'm going to see all the same things I did before.
Everything's going to be dull again.
But I really need to emphasize here for anybody who's listening, like I would not have done it the same way today that I would now.
Yeah.
Right now, like there are amazing resources available, through Metabolic Mind. And you can follow Dr. Palmer. You can learn about very safe ways to gradually taper, using a hyperbolic process, which means it should be like a percentage incrementally done over
very slowly,
typically.
And under physician supervision.
Right. And I feel like I was very lucky that like I was able to do this and be safe and recover the way that I did, because I unfortunately, through Metabolic Mind, I talk to amazing people all the time, and sometimes people do go through these protracted withdrawal, injuries. Yeah. People can get really sick from going off of medication unsafely, and I believe you can keep a really positive framing and be gradual and take your time and remember that like your life can transform and just take it step by step. That's what I would say is the right way to do it, because you see a lot of people who could recover, it becomes derailed because they try to do it too quickly. Right. So, I of course wish I would have had the resources that are available now then. Like I wanted.
They didn't exist though.
They didn't.
No, you were all on your own.
I found my own way at the time. Yeah. But today there's great ways to do it with support.
100%. So you found Chris Palmer, you started doing a more ketogenic approach. Can you talk to me about your therapeutic ketogenic diet? Because you did this all vegetarian. So what exactly, like how did you shift your diet from how you were eating before to how did you turn into a therapeutic ketogenic diet?
Yeah. So when I started at the very beginning, I was actually vegan, but quickly decided like I would incorporate like family farm eggs, like local eggs, because that doesn't gross me out at all. And I'm so glad I did that because eggs are delicious.
Eggs are delicious.
Yeah. They really help. They're a definite staple for me. But, of course, it was a matter of figuring out the obvious foods that you can't eat when you're starting a ketogenic diet, like cutting out potatoes and rice and all, like all of those things. And when I very first started and tried like carb counting, I would feel like I could barely eat anything. Like it was going to be too restrictive. And I'm like, I can't even eat vegetables. Like, how am I going to do this? But I decided like just to focus on my ketones and eat more intuitively. And I found that, with the lower net carbs, the higher fiber vegetables and stuff, I could eat till I was satiated and still get into a high level of ketosis.
That's interesting.
So I would just, I did do still, because I love fasting, I would still do quite a bit of fasting in between, like both extended and intermittent. So that would help with having a shorter eating window. But I could eat till I was satiated and still maintain a higher level of ketosis.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because when I think of like a vegetarian diet, I would think just lots of plants, and then I instantly think carbs.
Yeah. But I did eat lots of salads and lots of like creamy, fatty dressings with them. And,
So tell me about what are your fat sources?
Yeah. So I love coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil. I love coconut milk, and I do like a lot of ethnic cooking and like different spice profiles. From having
it really opens up the world.
It does.
They're so good.
And having just a variety of flavors, I think, keeps the diet very satisfying. So I like ethnic foods, and I'll make a lot of like Thai style curries or Indian curries. Like
I'm coming over to Hannah's house.
Yeah, please do. You live near me. Yeah, that would be really fun, actually.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I can figure out some kind of like egg curry for
or I could just
style,
like bring some meat to put on it.
We'll work something out.
Or I'll just eat vegetarian for that day. I don't care.
Could you do that?
Food is delicious. I'm good with whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, let's make that a plan. But I do, avocados as well. I do eat nuts in moderation. That's one food I need to be careful about sometimes because I can go a little overboard. Yeah.
Do you do like macadamia?
I do. And I do eat cashews. I know those are a relatively higher carb nut, but I can eat those in moderation.
Interesting.
And I have like, when you come for dinner, I'll show you, because I just went like Costco run and bought a ton of nuts. I've got like a huge nut stash.
We get that big 1.5 pound bag of macadamias.
Yes.
But we can't buy it often because Goran will eat all of them.
Yeah, I put them in jars. And that is funny because actually Eric, my boyfriend, he's a compulsive nut eater, so he won't keep them at home, but he'll come to my house, and I always like find him like secret snacking like when I'm in the
They're
other
so
room.
good.
I know they are so good.
They are so
but,
good.
But pumpkin seeds are a great protein, like very nutritious for vegetarians. So I eat a lot of pumpkin seeds.
Okay, so let's transfer into the protein. What are your protein sources? Yeah.
That's been like getting enough protein has been more of a challenge for me, and I think becoming more cognizant like about nutrition and being more careful with my diet. I think much of my life I didn't get enough protein, right? So that is something I should be aware of. And
I think
careful.
A lot of people don't get enough protein, but especially
as a vegetarian growing up. And like I said, my parents accommodated me, but I don't think they were really careful about like, let's make sure she's getting enough protein.
Well, they probably didn't know what to do.
They just like,
they were just like, just give her this.
Right, just let her eat what she wants to eat. And like, I ate a lot of standard American diet.
That's what a lot of people do with vegetarian too. Yeah. It seems to be a lot of processed foods.
Yeah. So that's how I grew up. But now I do make an effort to eat enough protein, especially because I'm trying to build muscle and do more strength training. So eggs, and I get egg whites now and get the little cartons and do like smoothies with those. And I also have pea protein powder, which is, minimally processed, no added ingredients. I do eat tofu, tempeh, seitan, which is a little higher in carb but very high protein. And I don't have the sensitivity to that because that's made with wheat gluten, but it doesn't seem to bother me. And recently, and that's what's kind of interesting about the modern world, right? There's always so many innovations in like food products. So only recently I discovered something being marketed as like a tofu alternative made from fava beans. It's actually like 0 carbs and high protein. So that's a good one. And then another food I recently discovered is edamame pasta, which, very low in net carbs and delicious, high protein. And it's actually my favorite like pasta alternative. I've tried some other things, and I do like zucchini noodles too, but that's a good protein source. So.
I didn't realize there were so many protein sources that you could do.
There's a lot of options, and hulled hemp seed is also high protein and good, and so I think it's just a matter of me now just trying to add in as much protein as I can. But I do find it's satiating, right? It helps me to feel more satisfied with my food, and it's definitely good when I center and focus on protein.
Nice.
As a vegetarian.
So you mentioned that you don't really do tracking, right? So you were just eating intuitively, so you started to add the proteins, add the fats, kind of shift away from the really high carb plants. And then you measured with ketones. What did you use to measure?
So I used the Keto Mojo blood meter when I started, and I would get up higher too, I think, from the fasting like windows and like eating less. So, like to be around 1.5, but would often go up more around 3.
Okay. Yeah. And then how often would you measure?
It really varied throughout my journey. When I was first starting, probably 2 to 3 times a day. Okay. Yeah. But it
trying to kind of get a gauge.
To get an understanding. And there were some things that threw me off in the beginning that I know is common for a lot of people. Like I did, especially when you're moving away from like addictions to the kinds of foods you used to eat, would buy like packaged processed like keto sweets and treats sometimes, and those could definitely kick me out of ketosis. So
a lot of those are not
keto. Yeah, they're not.
They're not. They're marketed as keto because it's just a buzzy word, but they're not.
Yeah, and even if they could be keto, some of them are just engineered to be addictive, like other processed foods. So you just end up eating like 4, and then they're no
a serving size is this
friendly.
much. It's like the serving size is the whole bag.
Work.
Let's be real.
Exactly.
So would you make adjustments to your fats and protein intake based on your ketone levels? Or your fasting, like how would you do that?
Not really. For me at the time, it was like more about just cutting down on carbs. And I wasn't very strategic about like making sure I was eating a lot of fat, because I think also I was still a little bit, overweight at the time. So I had diet, my own fat stores
to tap into.
Yes, my body's like, I have an abundance of
I have sticks of butter on my body.
Right here. So.
That's funny. Cool. So you were able to tap into that. That's great. So, you had your 3rd episode. You've tapered off the medications, you've implemented a therapeutic ketogenic diet, plus all of the other things, the fasting and all of the other, metabolic therapies that you were doing. Talk about the improvements. When did it start to happen? Did you notice it immediately? Was it gradual? What was that like?
Well, the first thing when I started, like I said, I had just gotten out of the hospital.
Right.
With this episode. And in the past, that would be followed by a year of intense suicidal ideation,
Right.
deep depression,
That was the pattern.
debilitating. Right, that
Yeah.
was the pattern the 2 other times that I had experienced it. This time, like I was depressed like that, and I started ketogenic therapy. The severity of the depression immediately lessened.
Wow. Like immediate.
Like immediately. Wow. And
that's incredible.
You know, so that I wasn't suicidal. There was still anxiety and some depression and like, you know, coping with, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to go through this again. I can't believe I had another episode. I mean, all of that and a lot of pain around that. But, you know, within a few months, the depression lifted entirely.
Wow.
I started a new job that I loved at the time, which was working in marketing and development for a hospice. It was a great place to work. And I just started enjoying life immensely. And you know, it's now been more than 4 years and I have not had another episode of hypomania, mania, or depression. Like, it's been absolutely transformative. You know, not only the absence of symptoms, but getting back parts of myself that honestly I hadn't even realized I'd lost until they started returning. You know, like I said, a year in when it really peaked that like I feel like myself again, but even better, you know, because there's this post-traumatic growth and this newfound appreciation for things you would have taken for granted before.
For sure.
So I started to recover, you know, my creativity, my cognitive function, my memory improved again, my ability to focus, everything. And it's just been a really beautiful experience getting those things back and appreciating them so much more than I used to.
Yeah. Well, Hannah has always been very creative. Like you were big into art and just all music and all this stuff in school.
Yeah, we were in a creative and performing arts.
We were in Kappa, creative and performing arts. So, that was kind of, I guess,
and here
part
we are
of course.
making a video.
Yeah, right. Oh my God, I love it. Our education's come back, but it's always something you've been passionate about. So I can imagine just going from that, having so much creative energy to going to being just so dull and so just black and white, the world is so gray, how devastating that would be and how coming out of it would be like, so amazing that you had that back, especially when you thought that you were going to have to take medications and just be that way to live for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. It was like an awakening completely.
Yeah.
And I mentioned I'm going to be doing some more writing, kind of thinking about these things more deeply because there's actually, you know, a tendency, a lot of creative thinkers in the past have gone through these kind of altered states. And unfortunately, with our current medical model, their gifts are totally suppressed, right?
Yes.
In exchange for their sanity. And I think for a while it was, okay, on one hand, I have this blunting of my creativity because of the antipsychotic medications. I also have a slight fear of like philosophical inquiry or creativity because it seemed to become like a gateway to mania, you know, because you'd have these hypomanic episodes where you were immensely creative and like, you know, whether it's writing poetry or painting and feeling the richness of the world in this really elevated way. And I began to fear like this is part of my illness. And it was incredible with ketogenic therapy when I started to realize like I'm getting those things back, but in this healthy, like Zen flow kind of way where I can control this energy and I'm not afraid that it's going to spill over into this unregulated, you know, state. But I believe when we look at ketogenic therapy as something that's helping you to regulate your energy and the psychotic symptoms I experienced as energy dysregulation, you can see how like you can learn to control your energy differently. Like I still feel like I have some kind of, I don't even want to use the term neurodivergence because I'm like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's cellular divergence and like the way that I process energy or the way that I sense like, it's this energetic sensitivity or whatever. But I feel like now I'm able to control it in a different way to like make it work for me instead of having it be something that is an illness. And I think that everybody's capable of this, like people who go through these experiences. And I actually believe, you know, it's going to take time for this field to evolve and hopefully to change the healthcare system. But I believe that people like me in acute crisis could undergo metabolic therapies as a first-line treatment. I think they could be stabilized through things like fasting and ketogenic therapy, and then ideally taught some forms of like emotional mental integration. I think it's really interesting that we have this emerging field of like psychedelic therapy. And there's this huge focus, right, on set and setting and integration of the experiences you have. And then you have people come out of these intense, long, altered states, basically made to feel ashamed and broken, never told there's any meaning that they could uncover from them. And I'm starting to see that in a radically different way the more I continue to get.
That's interesting.
I wouldn't just, I'm not healing per se anymore, but I'd say continue to post-traumatic growth and a new understanding of the things that I've been through from this different perspective.
Well, I mean, you've come so far from that period of time and learned so much more. And, you know, as we get older and we continue to grow and read new things and all this kind of stuff, it definitely puts a different light on things. So it's cool that you're able to see kind of like an evolution of that period of time and seeing it for what it was, but now you're seeing beyond and what really it maybe actually is. Because when you're in it, it's so acute, you know, but then when you come out of it, you're able to look back upon it with some perspective.
Right. And then, of course, just a passion and advocacy to like help change that paradigm, because I think it's right now going through that is so traumatizing, and you have so many people with like the desire to be deep thinkers and creative and everything, but they come out afraid of themselves, like no tools to understand or find meaning in those experiences, and then totally blunted by these medications. And it's a loss, you know, not only terrible for the individual and their family, but like what about what they might have been able to contribute to society if they found an empowering way to treat and use their energetic sensitivities, you know, as a gift instead of having it just be a pathological framing. Right.
Yeah. I when you're talking about like in the front lines, like perhaps in psychiatric units and things like that, when people are admitted, like therapeutic ketogenic diets, get them stabilized, therapeutic ketogenic diets, giving them all the tools they need to do these metabolic therapies, and then going out into the world. I mean, because I know like I personally have been through like drug rehabilitation and just the food that is served.
It's the worst.
It's not great. It's not good. It's very processed. That happens in jails, hospitals, psychiatric units as well. And I would just wonder how much of that could be remedied just through food, just as a starting point.
Absolutely. And imagine the difference in messaging. If you're told like, this happened to you, you know, but you can heal this underlying
There's nothing wrong with you.
You inherently is who you are. And even what you experience, like honestly, when I think of it now, I see those altered states as a form of upregulated energy that I didn't know how to control, but they had a beauty to them too because of that, because it was a different experience of heightened energy, right? Like I remember the fantastical colors and so many things. I mean, and I'm not trying to romanticize it because there were definitely scary elements as well. It's kind of just messy and complex, right? But there was some beauty in it. And you know, think about it this way, like you can wake up from a dream that's really intense, like whether it's a nightmare or a beautiful dream. And just because maybe it was nonsensical doesn't mean that you might not think, oh, maybe that's got some symbolism that's relevant to my life, or like taking a moment to reflect on it and not just, I feel like people come out of these intense experiences and are just told they're broken and damaged and it was pathological and psychotic and they want to forget it.
And there's nothing of value that could come from it.
Instead of realizing, you know, this reflects something about like my sensitivity, and I do have this creativity and this heightened sensitive energy, but maybe there's ways that I can control it and make it work for me instead of just seeing it as an illness and having that process like you would with psychedelics of integration. And that's very different if you're told that, look, this is what can happen to you. You have these certain like, you know, metabolic dysfunction, but it can be corrected and you can heal. And that's a totally different message. Right now, everybody's told you have a chronic lifelong illness.
And you have to take these drugs.
That's it. That's your choice.
That's the only answer.
That's it.
Well, and it's always like a medication roller coaster because even psychiatrists and neurologists and all these people, they don't actually know what's causing, what's going on, and they don't know how each medication is going to affect each individual. So you're just like, okay, let's throw this one and this one and this one at it and see what happens. They don't know.
And there's like up to a third of patients, you know, with serious mental illness like bipolar and schizophrenia who are treatment resistant. So it doesn't matter what kind of cocktails and medications they're being put on, like nothing is really working. You know, and I'm affiliated, like you said, with Baszucki group and Metabolic Mind. So that was Matt Baszucki's story. You know, he was put on over 29 different medications for bipolar 1 disorder. Like me, he experienced psychotic break and all of that. Nothing was really working for him. He was basically disabled by his illness for like 5 years. And after starting keto, within like 4 months, he was back to being himself again. Now
it's giving me goosebumps thinking about it. Same as when you were telling your story. It's incredible.
And now he's working full time, you know, in a relationship, living independently. And I believe this is possible for so many people. And through my work at Metabolic Mind, of course, I get to capture, like, interview people who have incredible success stories with a wide array of diagnoses, you know, whether it's schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, major depression, eating disorders. People are finding transformative recovery through this.
I wanted to share with you an amazing deal that ButcherBox has going on right now. They're celebrating fall by offering new members free steak tips, chicken breasts, or ground beef in every box for a year. This deal goes until October 9th, so if you'd like to stock your freezer with ethically sourced premium cuts of meat, head to the link in the show notes and take advantage of it today. That's amazing. So why don't you tell me how did you get hooked up with Baszucki Group and Metabolic Mind?
Oh yeah, so I haven't mentioned this part of the story.
Not
it's kind of fun. So, like, you know, finding the work of Dr. Christopher Palmer in 2021 and having that absolutely change my life. But Brain Energy, his like groundbreaking book that's very famous now, had not come out yet.
I'll link it in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So it hadn't come out yet, and I had been like, okay, within a year, I was like, this has been transformative for me. Like, ketogenic therapy is doing something amazing. Like, how is it nobody's talking about this? So I was like searching for resources. I'm like, there's got to be a book or something. Finally, I'm like, oh my gosh, Chris Palmer's gonna finally like publish a book, Brain Energy. So I pre-ordered it and I started following him on social media. And it was before he came out, so I shared a little bit of my story on like one of his posts, and I was really surprised because he like reached out to me.
That's awesome.
And he was like set up a virtual meeting. That would not have happened just a little later after his book was published, because then he got inundated.
It was like perfect timing.
It was perfect timing, divine timing for me. It was great. So we ended up meeting, and he at the time had a small group of volunteers he was getting together to like who were passionate about this, advocates, to help him raise awareness of the brain energy theory. And because I had a background in like nonprofit development and stuff, he invited me to be a part of that team, which was so awesome because not only, you know, was it meaningful to contribute to something I cared so much about. For the first time, I was meeting with other people who had similar experiences to my own. And it was actually the first time I realized there was a word for what I was experiencing, which was remission. You know, this is remission. And I'm like, this is possible not just for me, but for countless people. So I felt like I was on the brink of a really powerful movement, and that is now unfolding. So through that work, I actually got introduced to Jan Baszucki, who's Matt's mom and the founder of Metabolic Mind. When she was in Chicago, I went to meet with her and just wanted to thank her for advancing this field. And, you know, because you can think of so many families that, you know, maybe they have the resources to help build a movement like this, but they'd be like, oh, I'm glad my son's better. Let's like move on with our lives.
Move on. Yeah, that is not what Jan did.
Herself into this. And not just with financial resources, like her full heart and soul and energy. Like, she's just a powerhouse.
Very passionate about it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank her, but it evolved into an opportunity for me to start doing some freelance writing for Metabolic Mind about my experiences and metabolic healing, and that evolved into getting an opportunity to work full time in November of 2023 is when I started. So it's just been an amazing gift to be able to, you know, work in a field I'm so passionate about and help other people.
So what do you do there? What's your position? What are you able to do with what you've learned?
So I did do quite a bit of writing, like I said, about metabolic therapies, but there's a number of things that I've done that have been exciting. One of my favorites has been helping to develop this Think Smart metabolic framework for mental health that anybody can find on Metabolic Mind's website. And it was an idea that was formulated by Jan. That's really powerful in a framework, and then it's been informed by people like me, what we call experts by experience, people who have actually done this. And what it is, it's descriptive rather than prescriptive. Like, we have a lot to learn in this emerging field, so we don't have clear-cut things that we tell people they can do. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There's a lot of ways to tailor metabolic therapies, including how you approach your ketogenic diet, the things that you do. So Think is our ketogenic side of this model, right? Therapeutic integration of nutritional ketosis. And SMART is the other complementary metabolic therapies. So sleep, move, avoid, rebuild, and track.
Okay.
And so through this model, we talk to experts by experience about all the different modalities that they're using that have improved their mental health, just to give people inspiration and to show, these are things that do require individualization, customization. You should be working with a clinician, especially when it comes to the ketogenic diet, if you're adjusting medications and the like. But, it's just wonderful to get to interview those people and hear their amazing stories. And I always learn new approaches to try too, because I've learned through this too, healing is not some simple linear thing.
No.
There's post-traumatic growth and ongoing maintenance and transformation. Yes, all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We also did a Fresh Start award that I was a part of that was really cool, which was just for people who had done ketogenic therapy to transform their lives. We gave $10,000 awards to people who are early adopters and doing important advocacy work. Yeah. And then I've been involved in helping spearhead advocacy efforts. I volunteer for a new nonprofit called Metabolic Collective, which is all about the grassroots movement side of things. How do we mobilize people who have had their lives changed or the lives of a loved one changed, and they just want this to become mainstream, because we think, how can something this powerful be hidden in plain sight? We need to get this information out there. Everybody deserves to know that it's an option.
Yes.
So it's been really great because I get to collaborate with other advocates and people. I think sometimes, when they've been through such dark times and dark things, they come out with this real desire to just spread light and love and do good things for the world.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful to be a part of that.
That's amazing. So what do you see kind of happening in this field in the next 5 years?
Gosh, I would love to see it be mainstream knowledge that ketogenic therapies are an option within 5 years. And I do believe that it's possible. I really do.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just too powerful and just amazing of a change to not be mainstream. How many people are there worldwide that are suffering from some sort of mental health issue?
Over 1 billion.
Yeah. It's an eighth of the population.
Right.
And that's that we know of. I'm sure it's more than that. And can you just imagine those people being able to implement this? And honestly, I would say much easier to do than going on that medication roller coaster.
Absolutely.
Adjust your food, throw in some fasting, do some other positive lifestyle shifts, and do that. And can you imagine 1 billion more people being able to function healthy in society and give forth all those ideas and creative spirit to the world? What could we do with all that?
Yeah, and we need it. Look at all the challenges we're facing. And if people are metabolically unwell, mentally, physically unwell, how are we going to face any of those challenges? How are we going to address climate change or global poverty or anything?
Yeah, anything.
But to your point of medications can be so much more difficult. When you hear people say no one's going to adhere to keto because it's too hard, I'm do they have any understanding what some of us have to go through in terms of this uncontrolled weight gain and blunting of emotions, all these things? I mean, I talked to someone who explained that for her the turning point was realizing that she wasn't able to mourn the death of her mother and her sister because her medications just so stripped her of her emotions. And you ask about is keto hard compared to that? Are you kidding me? And in fact, I find the diet so satiating and enjoyable. I don't even see it as a sacrifice anymore.
Well, I think some people think it's restrictive, but I kind of see it as a freedom. It's freeing in a way because you have your life back. You are you again, and you don't have to have all those terrible side effects. So how is that restrictive?
Exactly.
But I think that just comes from a profound misunderstanding of what it actually is.
Right.
Obviously that person, hasn't been through all the things that, you've been through. Yeah,
no, I think a lot of people would definitely adhere to this. I know I would have tried it as a first-line option if I would have known.
Well, if 7 years gone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why so many of us just want desperately to pay it forward is, how can we reach those younger people so that they don't have to suffer and needlessly lose, a decade of their life.
It's needlessly losing. Yeah, completely.
Exactly.
So how can people find all of these resources?
Yes, I would encourage anyone to please visit metabolicmind.org. We have, like I said, all of those success stories. We also feature the scientific research that's up to date, what's happening in the field, all the randomized controlled trials that are taking place. We're making a lot of progress on the science side of things as well. But if somebody like from your community already has a healing story with carnivore, and it doesn't even need to be that they had a serious mental illness, even if they just implemented it and it really improved their quality of life and their mental health, you know, overall, we're want to capture those kind of stories too, because people can go in and share their strategies that they've used, the Think Smart strategies that they've used to improve their quality of life. And we think it's really important to capture as many of those stories as possible, because we really do have to advocate for like policy change and insurance, and we need to be able to show like this is not some niche thing. This really works.
Therapy.
And we know that. Us in the space know that, right? But how are we going to build momentum? And to your question of like, when will this happen? I really think it's like not an if, but when, and how can we work together to expedite it so that, you know, people can't afford to lose these years of their lives or their lives. You know, we know there's a real urgency with suicidality and all that. So we just need to make it happen quicker.
So how can people, if people have a profound story that they would like to share, how can they share that?
People can go to metabolicmind.org and find Think Smart, and there's a place where they can submit their strategies. They can fill out, we have two versions. There's kind of an in-depth form that takes about 30 minutes. That's a deep dive into everything that they do. But we also have a short version that just takes a few minutes where people can share what they do and upload a video and just share with our community and let the world know that this really works.
That's amazing. Great. Well, I'm going to link all of that stuff in the show notes below.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on Meat Matters, because I really, this is an important thing that needs to be shared. Metabolic therapies, therapeutic ketogenic therapies as well, but also just like the vegetarian side of things. Because I think, you know, mostly have like carnivore stuff on my channel, but you can do a therapeutic ketogenic diet and not eat any meat, don't do any animal fats, and still see profound, full remission of serious mental illness. Like this isn't a joke. Like you were like serious bipolar 1, psychotic break, completely healed. That's incredible. That's incredible. And stories like this need to be shared.
And there are a couple other stories like from the vegan vegetarian perspective on Think Smart. And you know, the nuanced thing I always do like to say is like these things need to be tailored. And I have talked to the people who said they only felt really fully better when they started eating animal fat. Like it's not necessarily a one size fits all. But I know people like me who've had incredible success with vegetarian ketogenic therapy. So we just want people to explore on Metabolic Mind, Think Smart, you know, what will work for them. There's no one right way to do it. There's a lot of options, and there's something that can work for everyone. Yes,
there is a way that you can make it work for you that will fit your lifestyle and your ethical beliefs, and you can heal as well. That's amazing.
And we'll have to do a little footage when we have our dinner together, our carnivore and vegetarian feast. It'll be fun.
The melding of the minds and the dietary philosophies together peacefully. Because you always see people always fighting fisticuffs. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. It's only the loudest voices that are always arguing. Well, Hannah, this was awesome. I'm so glad we were able to do this.
Me too. This was really great. Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. And thank you for watching and listening to Meat Matters with Jenny Middich.